Good morning. All right, so let's take a look here. Number 16, we kind of just did an introduction yesterday where we were focusing, I'm going to do this a little bit. There we go. We did a little bit of an introduction yesterday, just kind of looking at some of the attitudes that were brewing in the camp that led to this rebellion. And so again, it's a good word for churches. These are attitudes and behaviors that lead to rebellion. They lead to church splits and lead to other problems. So, but basically what happens is they accuse Moses at the end of verse 3 of exalting himself above the assembly of the Lord. Why do you think you're better than any one of the rest of us? And I don't know. I don't struggle with this in my church as far as I know, or at least to no extent that I even comes to mind. But yeah, I think there are places where people, they become envious of the pastor. They become envious of people in leadership. Like, well, why does he get to be the only one who gets to teach the Bible? Or why does, and it can be a bad attitude. And a lot of times it's just a heart issue, Our heart issues come out and we manifest them as we start, attacking other issues along the line. And so they got all their excuses. So Moses gets this idea. And basically he says that, the Lord's going to choose in verse 5, the one whom he has appointed. He tells them to grab their censers and all of Korah, put fire in them, verse 7, and then to come before the Lord, and that it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. And so he flips it back around on them. The whole accusation, they say, well, Moses, you're doing too much. And so he's going to gather them all together. And let's see here. And get Dathan and Abiram. And they're all going to come up to Moses. And basically, at the end of the day, he basically just says, right, that if this rebellion is a rebellion indeed, it's not of the Lord, he's like, I don't want you guys to die any normal way. In fact, I want the earth to come and swallow you up, like something unique to show that it's definitely God saying that he does not approve of what's going on. And so I'm really summarizing a lot. This is a long chapter and it's really just one big story. But he tells the congregation in verse 24 to get away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. A little side note I have on here. Back in verse 1, there was a guy named On. He's like not there now, which is funny because maybe he wised up and just got avoided it. Once he kind of realized, wait a minute, this is not the side I want to be on. So it's interesting. He disappears from the story, and it is almost like maybe he wised up. But it says depart now, right? And so in verse 27, they got away from around the tents of Korah, Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, their little children. And Moses said, by this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works. If they die naturally, right, then they're just like everyone else. And so it came to pass while he was speaking these words in verse 31 that the ground split apart under them, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and with their households all the men of Korah and all their goods. Right? And so they're all taken and they all die. He had told them to come with their fire censers, these little censers for worship. And so he tells Eleazar in 37 to get the censers out of the blaze and scatter the fire some distance away. And so he took it and he hammered it out as a covering on the altar. So these very bronze censers that they were using ended up being hammered out to be the cover on the altar of sacrifice, and as a reminder, in a sense, that this was the rebellion, and all this said, another bit of complaining. In fact, I'll just mention this. In verses 41 to 50, once again the people complain, and God sends a plague. But then Moses will stand in between. He stood between the dead and the living, so the plague stopped. Once again, Moses is constantly interceding for the people. People who are fighting against him were backbiters and rebellious, yet Moses was a humble man. And he continually was trying to go to bat for these people who took him for granted. Now, I kind of just skimmed through Numbers 16, not reading every verse, but summarizing a story that many of us know pretty well. And if you read it, you'll get all the extra details. But for the most part, that was it. There was the rebellion, so he gets them there. He calls down God to supernaturally destroy them, and the earth opens up, sucks them in, and it's everyone there. But everyone wasn't everyone. And that was the main thing I wanted to stop on today, is the idea that during this rebellion, Korah was a whole family group. Dathan and Abiram, they were heads of families, but there was a whole big group of people there. And you have to think, people started having kids young, and their kids started having kids young. So really, third, fourth generations, fifth generations, they all lived in the same household. And while the patriarch was alive, the patriarch was in charge of the family. Obviously, not everyone was sucked up into the ground that day, because the Bible tells us that Korah and his sons, they worshiped and they served at the tabernacle, but that they also were part of the worship team. And as the tabernacle was constructed and later the temple, the sons of Korah remained. If you're a note taker, probably worth having in this chapter where the rebellion of Korah takes place, Psalms 42, 44 to 49, 84, 85, 87, 88, right? And so the sons of Korah end up writing us many great worship songs, of which we're all big fans of, which shows that some people in the family obviously didn't take a stand. When everyone else in your family is doing the wrong thing, you don't have to. The whole church could be going one way, and you can still take a stand for the righteous. You can take a stand for what you believe in. And these people took a stand. And their descendants continued to be the sons of Korah. It was the family name they were known as. And it was because those job descriptions were all given by the names of the people who were the heads back then. So the name traveled down for hundreds of years. But while these guys, right, Korah himself, they were arguing with Moses, well, you do too much. Well, everyone's holy. Why don't we get to do more? That's not the attitude that his whole family had. And in all honesty, it would be a sad, discouraging, and just non-productive place if everyone in the church just wanted to be the pastor. Listen to what the sons of Korah of later generations have to say. Psalm 84, verse 10. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. Now, we know those words. Better is one day than 1,000 elsewhere. But is there not a much deeper meaning when you think about who wrote that? I'd rather be a doorkeeper, a humble role in the church body, than to dwell in the tents of the wicked. Well, there they were. Them and their tents got sucked into the earth. So these sons of Korah obviously stepped aside. They left their family and like, you guys might want to fight with Moses. We don't want to. And we're not going to be a part of this. And they left the group. And for generations, that story got passed on. But you know, the rebellion of Korah is a famous story. But I think the Psalms of the sons of Korah are probably even more well-known and loved by people. People might not always know that it's the sons of Korah who wrote those specific psalms, but they're songs that we love. I want to flip over. I love being on the coattails of the women's Bible study. I don't get to go, but I get to hear what's going on. And they would have finished up Ephesians chapter 4. I think they finished up Ephesians chapter 4. And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16, you know, the head of the body is Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. And that's really a beautiful thing. And the church is a beautiful thing when every part of the body is contributing. Every part of the body is figuring out where it goes. And it's every joint and ligament, if you pair up some of these verses together, right? Every little body part, and that's the idea where, I think it's back in verse 2 where he says joint and ligament. But that's the idea now, is that every little body part has a function. But when all those body parts are doing what they were actually called by God to do, designed by God to do. You know, to be honest, Moses was a great and godly man, right? And Moses had a huge role. Moses being one of the most well-remembered people in the whole Bible. But, irregardless of being one of the most memorized and beloved people in the whole Bible, I'll be honest, I only rarely turn to the words of Moses in a time of need, in a time of struggle, in a time where I want to be comforted by the Lord. But I'll often turn to the sons of Korah, because they had a legacy. Blessed is the man whose strength is in you, God, whose heart is set on pilgrimage. Not this world, but I'm focused on where I need to be. And as they pass through the valley of Baca, the valley of weeping, they'll make it a spring, a place of blessing. And so, again, these people felt like they didn't have an important enough role. And, well, these guys are the ones that everyone sees and remembers. But again, it ended up being that their descendants, they left us with some real gems. All right, God bless you guys. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.